Guys, welcome back to Brit's Book Corner. Today's video is going to be my experience with Camp Nano. If you guys have been watching for a while, you would know that I took part in Camp Nano in April, and I wanted to just share my experience with you, what I learned from Camp Nano, and whether or not I'll be doing another Camp Nano in July. At the beginning, when I heard about Camp Nano happening in April, I immediately thought it was going to be exactly like NaNoWriMo, just in April instead of November. And I wasn't real sure what I thought about that. I wasn't real sure anything. I just didn't know what to expect from it. I thought it was going to be another 50,000 words and 30 days kind of thing. And I was skeptical on it. I was skeptical on whether or not I was going to do it. I was skeptical just overall, like, did I want to do it when I was in the middle of 2 writing projects and I still had other things that I wanted to do? And so when I did some further looking into, I watched a couple YouTube videos. I watched people talking about, you know, their Camp Nano plans and what they were doing and what Camp Nano was for them. I realized I was wrong. That Camp Nano was just a work on what you are working on, like set a goal for yourself, and your goals that you set on the Camp Nano website are yours. Like, you can completely customize them. You can make it words, you know, whatever you want to do. And so I was like, okay, now that I know that that's what that is, that's what I want to do. And I had it in my head that I wanted to finish Project Kiss, and I wanted to finish the Wattpad story that I was working on at that time. And so I kind of prepared myself for that. I was like, okay, you know, I put a lot of thought into whether or not I was, nope. After realizing that I was wrong and realizing what Camp Nano was, and learning that I could create my own word count goals and set my projects the way I wanted them to be, I realized that it was something that I wanted to do. I just had to think about it and think about how I was going to approach it, what I was going to attempt, everything. And so I put a lot of thought into deciding whether or not I was going to do Camp Nano, because I was so back and forth. Like, I liked the idea of setting my own word count goals. I liked the idea of working on whatever project I wanted to work on. I liked that it could have been editing or reading or revising or zero drafting. I liked that it could be absolutely anything, but then I also didn't want to pressure myself into finishing projects that weren't necessarily ready in my mind to finish. And that's kind of where my back and forth came from. Every day I was thinking, okay, I can do Camp Nano. And then the next it was, I don't know if I want to do Camp Nano. And so all of my thoughts were centered on Camp Nano for pretty much all of March. And when I actually did decide to do Camp Nano, I was just like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish Project Kiss. I'm going to do my Wattpad story. And I want to plot a book. The week of April was very stressful because I had gone a month without writing. I'd gone a month without looking at Project Kiss. I mean, I had written like 4 days, I think, before Camp Nano, but I still wasn't in the groove for that. I was stressing over my schedule because, you know, with this whole coronavirus thing happening, I was having to homeschool my 6-year-old. I was having to deal with homeschooling on top of a 2-year-old, on top of a puppy and a senior citizen dog, on top of writing and filming and YouTube and just everything. So the whole first week was stressful because I was trying to get the content that I wanted to get out on the page. There were days where I was rewriting and rewriting and rewriting chapters. There were days where I would sit down at my computer and it would take me a half an hour before I could even start writing, because even though I knew what I needed to get on the page, I just couldn't form the words to get them on the page. So that very first week of April was super stressful because, you know, there was just so much going on at that time and I just wasn't prepared for it. Honestly, if I would have known that this whole coronavirus thing would have happened and the fact that I would have been homeschooling, I don't think I would have chosen to do Camp Nano, because that just added so much extra stress on my shoulders that I don't know if I would have done it. The week came around with its own stresses adding on to the top of the stress that I already had. I was in a better groove with the homeschool system. I was in a better groove with just my schedule, my routine, everything in the morning. I knew what had to happen. And so once I had that done, that stress kind of took it away. But as soon as that stress went away, new stress came because I realized I was on the fast track to finishing my projects early. At the end of the first week, I was working on one or two, possibly all three of my projects in a single day. And I was fine with that until I realized I was on the fast track to finish. And in that second week, I had it in my head that I had to take these projects and stretch them to the end of the month. So I would sit there and I would plan, okay, I can work on each project every third day. So Project Kiss one day, Wattpad the next, and plotting the next. And it would stretch to the end of the month. But that didn't, you know, accommodate anxiety, illness, adding in chapters or scenes that needed to be added in. That didn't take into account anything. Then it was, okay, I can work on 2 a day and stretch it to the end of the month. I can only work on these days and stretch it to the end of the month. But none of those seemed to fit. None of those seemed to sit right in my head. And I stressed for those for like 4 days. On that 4th day, I realized, you know what? If I'm going to finish these books, I'm going to finish these books. If I'm going to finish this project, I'm going to do it. Because my goal was I had to tell myself, my goal was to finish my projects, not make it to the end of the month. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I was going to be finishing early. And in my head, because I had finished way early in November, I felt like I failed regular Nano because I finished early. And in my head, in that second week, before I came to terms with it, I had it in my head that if I finished early, I failed. If I finished early, it was just a sure sign that I was not meant to do these things. And it took me realizing that it didn't matter whether or not I finished at the end of the month or not. It just mattered whether or not I accomplished my goals for that month. And when I realized that, I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And then in the end, I ended up finishing all 3 of my projects within days of me realizing that all I had to do was just finish. So after finishing my projects, I took a couple days to decompress because in my head, I said, I finished. I have 2 free weeks where I don't have to write. I don't have any goals to meet. And I was so ecstatic. And then I realized that wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was to write every day in April. And because I came to that conclusion, stress came because I was like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to read through Project Kiss? Am I going to start writing book 2 for my fan series on Wattpad? Am I going to plot another book? I started adding in so many different ideas in my head that I stressed over which ones to pick. And even though I had already accomplished so much in the first 2 weeks, I wanted to accomplish more. So when the 3rd week rolled around, I started my read-through on Project Kiss. Starting the read-through came with its own stresses because I needed to have information from book 1 to move on to book 2, which is now book 3. But I needed all this information, and I needed to get it from book 1 so that I could, obviously start working on the sequel if I needed to. And my read-through system is a little weird. I do what I call a color-coded highlighting system because on Microsoft Word, you can highlight in so many different colors. And I chose to highlight the names of my characters just so that they stuck out when I was reading. The physical descriptions of my characters so that I know exactly who looked like what so that I could write that down because I always write it down and I didn't write it down for Project Kiss. Any careers that they had because, again, I needed those for book 2. I highlighted anything that I wanted to be deleted in one color. All of these things are in a different color, by the way. I highlighted, things that I knew how I wanted to change. So if I read it and I knew exactly how I wanted to change it and fix it, I had to highlight it in a color and add a comment to the side with the change. If I wasn't sure if I wanted to change it, delete it, or keep it the way it was, I would highlight it in a completely separate color. And because of that, my manuscript would look like a rainbow. And that's why it added stresses, because I was always thinking like, okay, how can I change this? Do I want to delete this? Do I need to delete this? Then I realized that I was using words like can't, don't, won't, wouldn't, and shouldn't so many times that Microsoft Word literally highlighted every single one of them and was giving me suggestions to use do not, can not, would not, will not, should not, could not. And that just added so many more stresses because I'm like, Nobody says I cannot. Nobody says I do not. Nobody says I will not. You know, things like that. And so I was like, oh my God, Microsoft Word is not getting me. And that just started so many new stresses. The more I read through the book, the more I realized that I just needed to ignore what Microsoft Word was telling me right now and just focus on getting the content of the book the way I wanted it before I took on the big changes of changing can not, would not, do all of that stuff. I realized, okay, that took a lot of stress off me because I was just focusing on the content. If I was reading a paragraph and I got to the end of it and I was like, what did I just read? Well, I would sit there and I would say, okay, this is this. If I read a dialogue line and I realized that the sentences were backwards, I'd highlight it and say, flip these. If I realized that words were missing, I would put them in. You know, I just kind of threw myself into the work. And even though it was stressful in and of its own, it was still helpful for me because I was reading through the first half of the book that I wrote in the very beginning of this year. And I was looking at it with fresh eyes. I was looking at it as if I was reading it for somebody who was getting ready to publish it. During that third week, when I first started my read through, I edited the first 6 chapters just to test my system because I hadn't used my system since December, and I just wanted to make sure that it was gonna work for me so that I knew that after I moved on from the first 6 chapters, I either would change my editing system or, you know, all of that. So my system worked. It went really well. The first 6 chapters, I felt the changes I made were great. Now I'm ready to read through it again and know that a lot of those changes are most likely going to need to be changed again, but that's okay. I wasn't stressed over that. So I finished my read through in week 3 and in week 4. And once I finished that, I started thinking, okay, when do I want to edit? And part of me wanted to let the read through sit for a while just so that I could clear my head out of all of it. But then I remembered what happened back in December after I finished my NaNoWriMo project. I let it sit and I read through it and then I let it sit again. And then all of the changes that I had highlighted in my system and all of that stuff didn't stick in my head for that book. And in the end, over half that book has to be changed because all of the changes that I did add when I went back to edit sucked. And that book is still sitting on my computer completely unedited, completely just sucky. And I cannot bring myself to work on that because I know how bad it is. And I know eventually I'll probably work on it or try to work on it. And, you know, maybe that'll be a video for in the future. But I knew that's not what I wanted to happen with Project Kiss. And so I made the decision to start editing right away. Always, when you do something new, it always comes with its own stresses. But these stresses weren't super bad. Most of the changes that I needed to make were minor. Most of the changes that I needed to make were, you know, when I said so-and-so didn't know who so-and-so was, but in reality they knew who so-and-so was. Some of those changes needed to be like just the way sentences were worded, things like that. But it brought about the stresses because there are at least 3 chapters that need to be completely rewritten, and 2 chapters that need to be combined, possibly more than that when I read further into the book. But here's where things get rough. Those 3 chapters that need to be rewritten, I am really good at writing the scenes that need to be rewritten in these chapters in third person. I'm great at writing them in third person. I am not okay at writing them in first person. I've never been good at writing them in first person, and I struggled. Yesterday in my editing, I planned to do 2 of those 3 chapters, and the very first chapter took me an hour. And I rewrote that chapter 4 times before I felt myself fall into that groove and just write the chapter, which led into the second chapter, which led into, I ended up editing like 3 more chapters after that because I just got into a groove. And once I got those scenes down, I know that they're probably not the best, but I mean, you know, it was stressful. Brings us to today, which is April 30th, the last day of April, and I have to tell you, I am 2 days away from finishing editing of this book. My very first round of edits, I should say. And so it's nice to know that I'm very close to the end. There's at least 1 more set of 2 chapters that might have to be combined, and then there's at least 1 more chapter that might have to be completely rewritten. So I'm stressing a little bit about that. But, you know, it feels really good to know that I not only wrote half of this book, I read through all of this book with an open mind, and I got the editing done with an open mind, and I took my time with it, and I knew what needed to be changed, and I knew that when I encountered something that I wasn't sure about on the first reread, that if I wasn't sure about it and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, then it probably needed to be changed. So I made changes as I found necessary. So overall, even though it was a very stressful Camp Nano, it was a very good and successful Camp Nano. That brings me to the question of, am I going to be doing Camp Nano in July? The answer is, I don't know. I've tried to think about it, tried to consider all of my options. I tried to just sit down and say, do I want to do Camp Nano in July? And part of me wants to say yes, because part of me wants to do like just a whole new book, like dedicate July to, you know, book 2 of Project Kiss. And I don't know if that's what I want to do. I don't know if I want to commit myself to that, because Lord knows what's going to be happening in July. I won't be homeschooling as much, if at all. I won't be, you know, if we're able to leave our homes again, we'll be camping, we'll be doing a lot of fun things this summer, and making up for lost time for the spring, and just a lot of other things. And so it's like, I don't want to dedicate myself to July just yet if I'm not fully aware of what's going to be happening. I'm sure that come June, I will make a decision, and once I make a decision about it, I will either post about it on my Instagram, which will be linked in the description below, or I will be making a video talking about whether or not I'm doing Camp Nano. So, you know, the answer is I don't know, and I probably won't know for a while. That is it for my experience with Camp Nano and if I will be doing it in July. I feel really good talking it out and explaining a lot of things to you guys and about how I felt and just all of that stuff. I hope your guys' Camp Nanos went a lot better than mine. Comment down below how yours went. Did you finish your projects? You know, how did they go? What did you finish? What did you not finish? What did you stress about? Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Wattpad. And don't forget to like and subscribe this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.